welcome to the show, dude.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm excited. Another friend through jiu-jitsu. It seems like most of my friends nowadays are via jiu-jitsu.
One way or another.
Yeah, seriously. It all ties back. But I mean, the way I start pretty much every podcast, every conversation is I want to get a better understanding of where you come from. Like, how'd you get here from where you were? What's your background?
Yeah. Man, that's like such a wide open question.
Take it wherever you want.
Where did I come from? Well, I was born in Atlanta. I went to UGA, and I've never worked, I guess, a regular job. That's my kind of thing. Is I've never done well. I mean, I've worked jobs, like I've worked in restaurants mostly, bars, those types of roles, and I struggle with having a boss, like really hard struggle. I don't operate well with someone over me telling me what to do. It's probably a personal flaw, but it's sort of pushed me down this path of entrepreneurialism and starting my own stuff and building my own businesses. So I pretty quickly, so in college is when I really started building stuff. And once I got a taste for it, I never looked back. I mean, I'm not wealthy by any good measure right now, but I've always been able to pay the bills at least, and things have started to sort of accelerate lately, which is really exciting. And yeah, so that's my big thing is freedom. I want to be able to decide my own path. I want to be able to set my own day. If I want to work 18 hours, then I want to be able to work 18 hours. If I want to take the entire day off and just go, because that's what I feel like I need for the day. Just, take a impromptu road trip or spend all day doing jiu-jitsu or whatever I feel like I need to do for that day. That's what makes the most sense. I like the freedom being able to do that, not having to ask somebody else's permission. And so for me, that's my number one thing is like, I will sacrifice everything, including potentially making a lot more money. All my friends I went to school with make so much more money than me. They've always made more money than me. They all went to be consultants for like Deloitte or working where doing sales. Like I ran into a buddy the other day. He's like, yeah, man, I make $400K a year. All right. And I'm like, I can't even imagine. It's pretty insane, which is, one day I'm sure I'll make that doing on the path that I'm on, but I definitely sacrifice a lot of the early money in exchange for freedom. And I'm comfortable with that exchange. So
entirely. I literally just had this thought earlier this morning when I was walking upstairs is the idea of pushing the gratification. Like I literally was talking about working in a bar, stuff like that. That's what I'm going to be doing here in Austin is bartending, working doors, because I know that the allocation that I have in terms of total resources, if I spent most of it on a job that I didn't necessarily like, that took up most of my time with the boss that I had that was telling me to do X, Y, and Z, I wouldn't be able to allocate those resources to adequately build the things that I want to build. And it sounds like that's pretty much right where you are as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So
how's my audio coming in? Just by the way, is it?
No, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah. Your video kind of gets choppy every once in a while, but
okay.
The audio
that's
been straight.
He'll cut all this out, but this is Riverside, and it basically records at a lower clip, and then in post recording it up, I guess it like saves energy or something.
Interesting.
But yeah, so you went to UGA. If I remember correctly, you started a business while you were there. What was that like? How'd you manage to do that?
So here's the story. So I'd played around with entrepreneurial stuff before then. I did little odds and ends in high school and hustled and stuff. But my first real business venture was freshman year of college. I'm sitting in the dorm having a conversation about Shark Tank. Everyone loves talking about Shark Tank and business stuff and business ideas. And one of my friends, we were just chatting. One of my friends was like, if I could just come up with a genius idea I could build an amazing business and I'd be rich. It said something to that effect. And I just immediately was like, I don't think it has anything to do with the idea. I think it is all about how you execute on the idea, how hard you work, how smart you are about how you work. And I think that matters more than anything. You can take a really dumb idea, and I think there's a lot of examples of this. I think time has shown me to be right, but you can take a really dumb idea, and if you execute on it really well, you can still build a successful business. And I was just like, we were arguing, we were going back and forth about it. And I just said, hey, I'll take the dumbest idea. Take like bow ties, for example. If you take bow ties, you can build a successful business if you really put the effort in and do it right. And he was like, nah, bro, you're being ridiculous. And I was like, you want to bet? You want to bet? And so right then and there, I decided, you know what? I'm going to build a bow tie business just to show this guy what's up. So over the next year and a half, I built a business making bow ties. I didn't even like bow ties, to be honest, that's going to like blow some people away because I was like the bow tie guy in college. But for a year and a half, I built this bow tie business. They were locally made in Athens. And over that year and a half, I sold $20,000 in bow ties. And that's not all profit. And it was a ton of work that went into making that. So I won't say it was a super profitable business, but I proved my statement to be correct. And what it came down to is like, I could have kept building the business and probably expanded into other types of clothing, like Southern clothing items. But what I realized, and this was it gave me a lot of confidence because I was like, yeah, it has nothing to do with having the best idea. It has everything to do with how hard you work and how fast you can iterate on that idea. Like, even if you start with a dumb idea, you can always tweak it and change it and improve it over time. The key is starting and working your ass off and kind of adjust, like rolling with the punches as quickly as possible. But the other big lesson I learned was it's really, really hard to build a business. And it's even harder to build a business if you don't actually really like the business. And that was kind of like, okay, cool. Maybe in the next business I build, I actually am passionate about.
Instead of just selling bow ties. I think it's hilarious. You started a business out of spite almost. You're like, you know what, dude? Check this.
Oh yeah.
It worked though.
It worked. I hustled. Like I had the bow ties in 13 stores across the Southeast United States. All those little Southern clothing stores. Yeah, I'd get them to carry it.
You were at UGA. Greek Life's big. A lot of bow ties in Greek Life. So I mean, that's a prime market.
Oh yeah. I was in a fraternity, so it was like I was selling it to all my fraternity brothers and guys in other fraternities and stuff. So, but yeah, I ended up shutting it down because I was like, I am killing myself to run this business. It's barely making money. It's making money, but it's not making a lot of money. I'm not rich, and I don't really care about this. And so I just I shut it down, and I that's when I started bartending. So I got into that, and that was what paid the bills from there on out for mostly the rest of my college. And but I realized I was like, hey, like I really enjoy this. I want to do this, but the next time I start a business, it's something that I need to feel good about. And the rule that I sort of established for myself is the next time I start a business, I need to be comfortable with the idea that I'm going to run this business. And I'm not going to necessarily get rich, but before I have any major success with it, I'm going to run this business for 10 years. That is the mindset that I've gone into everything else with is, am I comfortable spending the next 10 years of my life building this? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to pursue it. And if the answer is no, well, then let me go find something else that I'm willing to devote that amount of time to.
Have you had any ideas where you've used that lens and had to say, you know what? Nope, I'm not comfortable doing that.
Yeah. There's definitely been some stuff. There's been a lot of stuff because it's so tempting, especially like the way my mind works. Like I constantly see problems to solve and opportunities. And so, but I think it's been hugely beneficial because I see this in a lot of other highly entrepreneurial people is that they just go like shiny object to shiny object. And based on that early experience that I have steered clear of all of that. Like there's so many, like I had like I was talking with my buddy last week about like AI plays. We're, doing like AI art and putting it up on Shopify and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, that could probably make money, but that's not something I'm passionate about. I'm going to work on the next 10 years. So I'm just going to stick to what I'm working on now. I'll let somebody else chase that shiny object.
Yeah. I think that's a very insightful perspective. Do you know who Alex Hormozy is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about that all the time, where they get an idea, and you literally just hit on this. They get an idea and then spend 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, a year on it, and give up on it and go to the next idea. When he's like, all you need to do is iterate on that idea, and then eventually it'll be successful. Similar to what you just said, it's just a matter of sticking to that idea. It could be a bow tie, for example, and I'm sure that if you did stick with that, you would have figured it out, but you made the decision not to. That's a very insightful perspective.
I still want to be the bow tie guy the rest of my life.
That's a hell of a nickname, dude. You can start a YouTube channel, man. The bow tie.
Yeah.
You know, it
was a big thing. Yeah.
Come full circle in like 20 years. You're like, you know what? I'm going back.
Just double down.
Yeah. So you started bartending, and then from there, what was going on?
So I learned a lot of skills doing the bow tie business. Learned photography. Learned how to build a website. I learned all of these skills, so it was hugely beneficial in that regard. And so while I was bartending, I started doing a lot of photography and working on social media and marketing for the bar that I was in, for some other bars that were by the same owner, and then also started kind of picking up some clients here and there for social media management and photography. Terrible business, but it was something that I thought was really cool, and I wanted to keep building those skills. So I was just getting paid like next to nothing to do hours and hours of work, just like working my ass off to get social content out and create all this content. And but then I left the bar, and I sort of jumped full time into that and was paying the bills with it. But then I started picking up some other clients that were not bars and restaurants. That was mostly where I started. I actually did for a little bit. I did it for SPG Athens. So
right
for
on.
the SPG, I did their social media and their content and all that. And then I at one point I was like, I'm just going to go all in on martial arts. And so I tried to work with all the SPGs.
Dude, that's sweet.
And it was cool. It was fun. But I kind of at the end of the day realized it's like, because there's sort of an upper limit on how many people you can bring into the gym. They just don't need what I was trying to offer them. And they definitely didn't make sense from a financial standpoint to pay what I needed to get paid to make it make sense. So what I landed on is I actually met my now co-founder, who owns a roofing business in Athens. And I started working with his business. And his business, it was a lot less about social media and content, at least at the time. And it was more technical. It was websites. He needed a good website, fast loading website that was ranking on Google. So it was SEO and website design. And I was able to charge more for that work. And I figured out that was way more scalable, because I didn't have to always be showing up with a camera and creating content. And like I could do that from anywhere, and I could do it very efficiently and quickly. I could easily outsource it if I needed to as well. And so I switched the direction of my agency into working exclusively with contractors. And that was kind of like the tipping point where I started getting some traction and started building up that agency, and was able to actually make a really good living with it for a bit. We had at the top 8 contractors.
And that's during college?
This was like right after college. So like tail end. And it's all kind of like in the transition. And there was a kind of a moment where I was like, oh, do I go get a regular job now? And I was like, nah, I'm just going to keep doing this. You know, I'm not making the same money that all my friends are going off and getting jobs, making like 60 to 80K right out of college. Yeah. But I was like, you know what? I value my freedom. So that was really cool. And I still have that business. So I do the agency. I haven't been putting a lot of effort into it. So our clientele has dropped. We're down to four clients right now. But as I talked to you the other day, I'm thinking about potentially bringing on a partner for that and scaling that back up. But the big thing, my main focus is now my software company, Proline. So I'm repping
right on.
Repping the logo here.
There you go.
My co-founder who owns Delore Roof, his name's John Delore. He owns Delore Roofing in Athens and Savannah. He has 2 locations now. Him and I just immediately clicked. Just had a really great relationship, and so we would constantly talk about his business and constantly talk about the things that he was struggling with. And so he would just, it was kind of funny. We would kind of say he complains, I build. That's the model. And so he would just be like, hey man, I can't, this is not working, or this is inefficient. So I just figure out some sort of tech solution, hack together something. And we started I had to start hacking together all these automations for him around sales follow-up, lead nurturing, just all these marketing and sales related automations. And over a year or two of doing that, we doubled his close rate. So he was closing about a little short of 30% of his quotes that he put out. And he brought that up to over 50, close to 60%.
Wow.
Of his quotes he started closing.
And that's incredibly significant.
Oh, it's
in any sales,
it's life changing for a business.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in any sales company or any company that requires sales, which is pretty much if you can double whatever it is, if you can double your close rate, that's cool. And also for you, that being your first client in that regard, or your first trial, that's pretty good efficacy, pretty good social proof right there off the bat.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we when we saw those results, we immediately were like, okay, or we didn't, it took us some time to kind of come to this realization. We were like, we need to build this into a tool that other roofing contractors can use. And so I started getting to work. We joined forces. So he became my co-founder on it. And so he's really the spokesman. I am more on like managing the business and the tech. And then he is the face of it as another roofing contractor. So he goes out, just like you're saying, he talks about what he does in his business and the results he gets in his business. And sometimes he doesn't even say, oh, it's because of Proline. He'll just say, here's how I'm running my business. Here's how profitable I am. Oh, by the way, here's my process, which just happens to be all of the software that we built. And that has really been effective at driving customers to us. So Proline is the company. We've now sort of iterated from being just an automation tool to now we're a full CRM. So we're a full business management platform specifically for roofers. And we're actually doing a full relaunch on that platform August 1st. So that's like not technically common knowledge yet. We've been very like low key about that. Because there's definitely some existing players that are going to freak out when we announce that.
Well, I'm just going to hope they're not listening to this.
we'll see.
This won't come out until this will be a couple weeks down the road. So maybe it'll be like right in line.
Yeah, that might be right in line. That might be perfect.
There you go. Yeah. If anybody needs a roofing software, here's your guy.
We got you. It's cool. We're really pushing the limit of what's possible for these guys. And we're staying focused. That's been like a huge question. Another like sort of lesson learned is we keep thinking about, do we sell to other people? Do we sell to other types of contractors, or do we sell to just companies in general? Like because we've had a lot of companies be like, hey, can I use this? I'm an insurance agent. And early on we were like, yeah, sure. Like you can try it. And what we figured out pretty quickly was we need to stay super focused, because when we let in these people that are outside our target market, we get massively distracted. They have different features that they want. There's different restrictions in those industries that we have to look out for, especially like some industries like real estate and insurance, especially. There's rules around how you can communicate, who you can communicate with, and how you can promote yourself. And those are things that just, so it just becomes exponentially more complicated when you start really expanding out your target market. So we've come to the realization and the conclusion that we're going to stay super focused. We're not necessarily, now you kind of have to have a wider focus if you're trying to build $1 billion business, but that's another thing that we sort of decided actually fairly recently, is like, we're not trying to build $1 billion business. We want to build probably at its max, maybe $100 million business if we really crush it, but somewhere between 80 and 100 million is where we're targeting before we exit. And that's probably going to be over the next like 5 to 7 years. And we want to be as profitable as possible. We're trying to stay efficient. We're trying to stay very focused and serve one market as well as possible. So we were trying to raise money there for a minute, and that approach it blows my mind, but investors do not care for that approach.
Really?
We were turned down. They don't want to hear about profitability. They don't want to, it doesn't make any sense. But they don't want to hear about profitability. They're specifically talking to VCs. Angels are a little bit different, but VCs, they don't want to hear about profitability, and they don't want to hear that you're shooting for anything less than $1 billion, even if it's not practical.
Which is crazy. And then it harkens back to the adage, riches are in the niches.
Yeah.
So and another one that I've heard is concentration creates wealth, diversification preserves it. And I think that's a pretty solid strategy that you got going on. It's so, you mentioned it earlier, it's so tempting, especially people that are entrepreneurial in spirit have similar tendencies, I think. And you mentioned it. It's like you're always looking like, oh, I could solve that problem. I could solve this problem. I could solve that problem. And it's so tempting. Oh, you know what? Insurance agencies like our product. Maybe we should also try to build. And then you get so spread out where you don't provide as much value to any of them. And then the company fades. But I think that's a really interesting approach. How many you guys are trying to stay slim? I'm assuming if you're like capping your growth per se, like how many employees?
We have 4. Well, right, including myself and my co-founder. So there's 4 people on the team.
Cool.
And we're trying not to bring on anybody else. We're looking at, we might bring on one person specifically for marketing, and then from here on out, we're trying to only bring on virtual assistants offshore, mostly for the customer support side, and just stay super lean and profitable. If we can keep it super lean, this is crazy. I was looking at the stats on Twitter when Elon Musk took over, and he fired like 80% or 90%.
They're down to like 550 full-time engineers or something like that.
Yeah, and they I can't remember exactly how it broke down, but there was just so much waste. There's so many people that were doing nothing, and they were just existing and kind of doing these BS tasks just to eat up time. Mm-hmm. And you can cut them out, and the business still runs effortlessly. And so that's one. It happens so quickly when you start raising tons of money. You have millions, $50 million, $100 million in the bank, and investors are pressuring you to spend that as quickly as possible. It's like, well, the easiest way to spend that is hiring. Yep. And like on paper, if you get more people in the door, you're gonna build something crazier, or better. But what ends up happening is just a massive amount of waste. And so we want to steer as clear of that as possible. We're going to force ourselves to keep it lean, which also allows us to provide better pricing, so we can provide better value to our price, to our users. So
it's kind of right in line with the whole premise of the business as well, in terms of automation and systematization. It's the more you can do that, the leaner you can stay. So it kind of is on par for the brand. It maybe be a little bit off if you guys were trying to like maximize everything, and then you're also an automation company essentially. So that's very interesting. I think that it's almost like y'all are taking a minimalist approach.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very much so. Yeah.
Which is cool.
We're definitely, we want to prioritize providing a great experience and providing good customer support and good, just overall good value to our customers. But at the same time, it's like, we're going to push ourselves to try to squeeze out as much out of the limited resources we have as possible without just, going crazy.
That's awesome.
People at the problem.
And to go back to college, if I remember correctly, which I could not be doing, did you end up like leaving college to pursue that business or something like that? Well,
yeah. Correct. So I did I like to say I did my 4 years. I was in college for 4 years, but being in true entrepreneurial fashion, I kept switching majors. So I took like a year of engineering, a year of marketing, or 2 years of marketing, a year of, it was international affairs. And so I tried everything. And so when I got to the end of it, I still had at least another semester that I needed to take to finish my degree. And eventually it was going to be a marketing degree. And I was building the agency, and I was like signing up for classes, and I was like, I don't care. Because the previous semester I was taking all these higher level marketing classes, and they were just teaching me stuff that was completely outdated. Mm-hmm. And just, it was either stuff I already knew or was completely outdated. Like I remember when sitting in class and someone was like talking about how like social media was an emerging thing. And at the time, this is was part of my agency at the time when I was focusing more on bars and restaurants. I had over 100,000 followers across 3 or 4 different Instagram accounts that were promoting local restaurants and bars. I ended up kind of selling that. That's a whole other story. I ended up selling that off as a separate business, but it was at the time it was part of my agency, and I was just like, I was making money with social media, and I'm sitting there thinking like, it's not an emerging trend. Like it's
already
this is it. This is marketing now. And I just remember thinking like, what am I doing here? Like these people don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, I ended up just leaving after I did my 4 years, and I got out of there and just kept building my business.
That's what you should tell people. Like when they ask, like, did you go to college? Yeah. Did you graduate? I did 4 years.
That's what I said. Yeah. It's like I did my 4 years.
Hey, that's right on. I did 5, so whatever. But I actually find that fascinating too, because I got a real estate degree, and there was some, like in my graduate course, there was some higher level stuff that was like directly applicable, but relatively recently, after actually like within 6 months of getting out of school, I started working on like actual real estate stuff and investing. And I'm like, okay, more than half of the stuff that I learned in those classes is either, like you mentioned, outdated, or these teachers literally just don't know what they're talking about because maybe they've never actually invested in real estate. So it's one of those hindsight 2020, but I think it's very cool that you just said, like, screw it, I'm going to go ahead and pursue this. That's how movies are made. There's going to be a story about you.
That's yeah, we can hope.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Have you always, I mean, you mentioned that you don't like having a boss, but have you always, since you can remember, had a dream of being an entrepreneur, or was there like an impetus of you saying, you know what, this is how I'm going to do it, or did you just kind of build over time?
No, I would say it's complete opposite. I like to say I was pulled kicking and screaming into it.
Because like even when I was building a bow tie business, I essentially started the business out of spite, and I mean, like good natured spite. But I did, even at that point, I was like, I don't know if I like it. It wasn't until that business started really making money that I was like, oh, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And so there was a point, like probably my sophomore year, when it was, I was making sales and making money with it, where I was like, okay, let me start kind of thinking about my long-term entrepreneurial career. And but when going into college, I had this whole vision for my life planned out that was not entrepreneurial in any way. I went to UGA on a scholarship for RTC, Army RTC. So I was in Army RTC my freshman and sophomore year, and I was doing international affairs. I had this whole trajectory planned out that was like, I'm going to go to the military. I'm going to get out of the military. I'm going to work at the State Department or, CIA, some 3-letter agency, and then potentially have get into politics and go down. I mean, I had this whole thing mapped out. Yeah. And then I got there, and I did really well in Army RTC. I was near the top of my class freshman year. And it was at the end of my sophomore year, going into my junior year. And I was, making money with bow ties, and I was like, you know what? This is not the life that I want. Because I'd kind of gotten a taste. I mean, RTC is not the military, but you get a taste for it. 'Cause you go to camps, and you go to training, and you get that feel for the bureaucracy. That's what really killed me. I was so angry. It was so disorganized. They'd lose stuff all the time. It's like they were supposed to be paying for our apartments because I was on scholarship. They were supposed to be paying for my school. And it's like my sophomore year, they didn't give us the money I almost got kicked out of my apartment because they didn't pay for the apartment for like 8 months after they were supposed to pay for it. And so I would go in and ask all the time. I remember I started like trying to investigate. So I was like calling the pay department, or I guess I can't remember what exactly but whoever's in charge of like distribution of pay. And I started like kind of going up the chain of command a little bit, like, hey, like what's going on? Like, what's the status? And then that got back to my commanding officer, and I got massively chewed out. He was like, never, ever go around me. And I'm just thinking like, bro, like I'm trying not to get kicked out of my apartment here. And so it was a lot of different things like that kind of added up. And I have a massive respect. I have still a lot of friends that they stuck with the program and they went through in commission. Massive respect for the military. It was not for me. It was crushing my soul because I have that such entrepreneurial bent where like I see a problem, I got to fix it and solve it. And the military is the exact opposite. Yeah. It was like, it's like, oh, you see a problem, just live with it, right? Yeah. Don't touch it. Don't stand out. Don't mention it. Just ignore it.
Don't look at it.
Right. Don't look at it. Yeah. It's none of your business. Like that's the whole attitude of the military. And so but yeah, no, I was pulled kicking and screaming. And I think that's for the best because every time, it's extraordinarily difficult to build businesses. It's unbelievably hard. And if I felt like I had another option, I would take it. But I stick with it because no matter how hard it gets, in my mind, I don't have any other option. Like that was part of like leaving school and stuff too, is like I kind of burned the ships, right? I don't really have a plan B. Like this is what I have to do. And I think you see that a lot, I think, with entrepreneurs in general that are really successful is like they don't have plan Bs. It's like they had to make their main thing work, and that's why they made it work. And and you see the opposite too. And I have a lot of friends that's like they like the idea of being an entrepreneur and they try to start businesses, but they have a plan B. Like whether it be like their parents are there to give them, a golden parachute, or they they could easily go out and get a paying job. And it's like, they really struggle to build things because there's always that fallback.
Yeah. What was that like? I don't know much about your family or friend like group or anything like that, but I can imagine that there's a lot of tension in that conversation. I feel like for a lot of people to say, hey, mom, dad, friends, brother, sister. Yeah. I'm actually uncles, aunts, literally like that's just so ingrained in our society. You got to finish college, especially when you're so close. What was that conversation like with the people around you when you're like, yeah, I'm good on this?
Yeah. Everyone thought it was dumb. I mean, like and they're probably right. But my parents gave me a lot of leeway. They're entrepreneurs and neither of them have degrees. And they're actually in real estate. So they have a real estate company, real estate investment company. They have rental properties and stuff.
Need to talk to them.
They're doing, yeah. I'm happy to get a connection there. And they're successful now. They were not successful when we were growing up. So I didn't have, it's kind of a good balance. I didn't grow up with that feeling of like, oh, I can always go work for mom and dad. Mm-hmm. Which was, I think, good. That was really good for me to not have that. But I think they understood. So because of that, they understood that entrepreneur and they weren't like super freaked out by it. But there was definitely an element of like we were kind of hoping you wouldn't do this because we know how hard it is type of a thing. And so they definitely tried to discourage. They weren't super down on it, but they were just like, well, you got to know what you're doing. They helped me a little bit in college, but I paid for 99% of my way through college. So it was all that cost was on me. So it was that's a way more complex decision if your parents are paying for college.
Absolutely.
Versus like I did it all. I still have some loans from that time. Mm-hmm. So I did it on loans. Originally it was going to be paid for all by the military, but I transitioned that into loans and or money I was making bartending.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think I was fortunate in that regard. I from the point that I went to college, I really didn't have control of my own destiny. There was no one that was able to come in and be like, no, like, I didn't have anything. My parents weren't like holding anything over my head or anything, but they definitely were like, make sure this is the decision you want to make. Cause it's a big decision.
Yeah. And it's interesting how much weight that those voices can carry in those types of situations. But I think it speaks a lot to your tenacity and your resilience and your conviction that you took it anyways. And like you mentioned, you have a plan A, and you mentioned it earlier again, iterate. You have a plan A and then just iterate. You iterate. I think a lot of people, myself included, I've done this in the past where I'll have this idea and then I'll build up like where I want to go with the idea. And then I see all these, like these millions of steps that I got to go to get there. And then it'll almost discourage me, as opposed to when I've really been in sync and building momentum. It's just like, I have this idea and I'm just going to take one more step. So I think that's pretty interesting as well. I think that's a really cool thing that you kind of just said, fuck college.
Yeah. At the
What's
end of the day.
Do you have any advice for the guy or girl out there that's in a situation similar to yours? Because obviously you want to speak on stuff that you've experienced doing, but similar to yours, who's in college, maybe paying their way through college and doesn't really, has this inkling in the back of their head that's like, you know what, I don't want to go sit in an office. And there's nothing wrong with this. Like both my parents, I say this all the time, both my parents work corporate jobs. They're both very successful. They both have created phenomenal lives for themselves and for me. But I've known since I was a young kid that I did not want to do that. And my focus was at first athletics and then real estate, and we're moving forward from there. But what do you have to say to that person in college that's kind of thinking, you know what, I cannot go sit in an office. That's not for me. But they're scared or have reluctancies about taking that entrepreneurial step right out of college?
Yeah, I'd say it's really hard if you're at the end of college, and it's like, because it's going to take time. It's going to take a while to. Well, okay, it doesn't have to. I'll say that. I think if you believe it's going to take a lot of time, you're also like, you should try to move as quickly as possible. Like,
it's going to be Snapchat. It could be Snapchat where they're making like $3 billion in their dorm.
Right. Yeah. So you have to think big and you have to think positively. But I would say, like, start if you're confident that this is for you, because I'm totally with you. I think entrepreneurialism is not for most people. And if you're like on the fence and you're like, oh, I could work in an office, that looks good, but then also I'm curious about entrepreneurialism, just go work in the office. Like, you can create a great life for yourself that way. But if you're like, absolutely not, I can't do that, then you're going to have to figure out this other way. And that's when it's the right choice, is like when you're like, I have to figure this out because this will kill me. That is when you're like, that's when like, okay, you got to figure it out. And once you come to that realization of like, okay, I have to figure out how to make money on my own terms. The key is just to start today. And I think I have that rule of like the 10-year rule, but I think, it's also the flip side of that is like, you have to be careful. Don't look for like your ultimate passion in life, because that's also another trap, is like looking for the big idea. Just start something. You can iterate on it. Like that's the thing with the agency that I have. I started with the agency, and this software really kind of came out of the agency. It is technically a separate business, but I've just been iterating. You're not going to end up where you started. I mean, you might, but you probably won't. So it's like, just start something. Definitely service-based businesses are the easiest because there's the lowest capital necessary on the front end. But there's lots of stuff that's still reasonably low capital intensive, like tire or glass stuff you're starting. I mean, there's obviously an investment, but it's not like you're having. I don't think you're having to invest millions of dollars or anything to get that up and running, right? No. So it's like, e-com is definitely an option. But service is always going to be the lowest cost to start, because it's just your time. And at the end of the day, like, it is, and I've always said, like, the agency is one step up from a job. It's like a job on your own terms. Like, you set your own hours and everything. But at the end of the day, like, it is still a job. You're trading your time for money in a certain extent. But it's that step. And then you can sort of iterate from there and test and try things. But the biggest thing is just like, start today, like come up with a few ideas. Choose the one where you're like, okay, if in 10 years I'm still doing this, but I'm making money, I'm okay with that. That's like kind of the biggest thing. It's like something you can own, that you feel good about telling your friends and family, oh, I own this business. And that was the thing with the bow tie business. It's like, I don't want to be the bow tie guy in 10 years, right? But as long as family you can dinners, have pride in it. Say what? I
said at like family dinners, yeah, I'm the bow tie guy.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. I mean,
it's something, man. It's something.
I'd rather be the bow tie guy that's making a lower amount of money, but gets to decide my time allocation, my resource allocation, and gets to schedule my own days, than being the sales guy who makes more money, frankly. But that's
I agree
me.
with you there.
So that's awesome. I think there's another quote. I love quotes. It's the start that stops most people. And
Love it.
it's so simple, but in almost every endeavor in life, you think about somebody, we build up these huge walls and it's like, I can never get there. It's like literally just take one step. And Tyro Glass is a good example for me. Like I wanted to get into e-commerce some way or another. And for a long time I was like, well, I don't know what I would sell. I don't know what I would try to create of any value that would actually catch or anything. And it literally stemmed from me searching for a product. I realized that product wasn't there. I kind of sort of not handmade, but like pieced together the product. And I'm like, wait a second, I really like this. And then people started commenting. I'm like, wait, I'll literally start like this. I may make $100, but at least I've learned about SEO. I've learned about marketing. I've learned about all these different e-commerce aspects. And then you iterate, right? So then you have this sort of like, for you had those marketing, the skills that you built growing those social media brands for those, or pages for the bars and stuff. And then you iterate on those skills, and then you learn a little bit in your marketing classes and you iterate on those, and you add and add, but you have to start. And that's been, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. But for me, that's been one of the hardest things. I'm sure it's probably one of the hardest things for most people, is to just take that step where it's like, you know what, here we go.
Yeah.
I think that's the number one blocker, is just starting, right? And then the number two is sticking to it. And I think it's important, is like start something that you're confident you can stick with. And then you got to stick the persistence. Because that's the thing, is like every new exciting idea, after about 3 months, like it's still great that you're working for yourself, but within 6 months, the shine wears off and it will become work. At a certain point, you're going to have to just work, right? And you can have pride in that work, and it can be on your own terms. But I think that's another trap I see a lot, is like thinking that, oh, if I find the right idea, then it's always going to be fun and easy. And
Nope.
At the end of the day, it's like, it takes work. It takes really hard work. And like, it'll be fun and exciting. And you're going to have, points where it's still fun and exciting down the road, but there's a certain amount of time. So I think I totally agree. Like starting and then sticking with it and iterating. I think that's.
In my conversation with Coach Phil, our jiu-jitsu coach at SBG Atlanta, who I think is episode 3 of this of the Tyro Experience, we were talking about why people quit. And number one, he said it was hard, which is obvious. But throughout the time at SBG Atlanta, I remember just having conversations with people. People don't start jiu-jitsu. That's the first way they don't get into it, or they stop. They don't do it. And then there's a pretty high turnover rate, you could say, about 3-4 months in the white belt phase, where they're like starting to get a little bit better, but then classes get a little bit harder and you start to get smashed and you're like, nah, I'm good. And then blue belts have a very high attrition rate, because you get that first taste of you could say gratification. There's a lot of gratification within the journey of jiu-jitsu, but you get that first belt and you're like, holy cow. And then you realize how hard it is. And then you get that de-escalation of motivation, and then people give up. So I think there's a lot of carryover from that into business as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it mirrors it a lot.
Yeah, you're a blue belt as well. When did you get your blue belt in jiu-jitsu?
I believe it was October last year.
Right on. Well, let's get into that a little bit. I mean, I got more questions on business and stuff, but jiu-jitsu, why'd you start? What was the impetus for you?
Yeah, I started. What's the exact point that I started? It was kind of in the middle of sort of starting my agency, and I was still working in the bars. The thing with the bars is there's so many fights, and that was like my first. I mean, I never gotten any like fights in high school. Well, that's not exactly true, but it's like it was my first taste of like kind of more like just violence, was just these bar fights that would break out, and having to break stuff up and grab people and drag them out the door. The thing is, I was always sober or nearly sober because I was working, and then they were drunk, right? So it was a little bit of unfair advantage. But it got me sort of fascinated. I was like, yeah, let me. And then I was like listen to Joe Rogan, like so many people, like hear him talking about it. And I was like, like let me go check this out. So I went and checked out SVG Athens and got into it and really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, I think one of the things that really immediately drew me to it was how hard it is, and the constant, I don't want to say humiliation, but it's just like it will tear down your ego because you can't maintain. It's like, I mean, you can, but if you try to maintain your ego, you're gonna be a jerk, and you're gonna end up like, you can target small people. Like, there are people that do that, but it usually, like, you don't make it to blue belt if you're like that.
Yeah.
And I totally feel that with, like, after I made it to blue belt, it's like you feel that sense of accomplishment because it's so much work to get there. But then you're like, oh, I'm still completely terrible at this. Like, I'm so far away. Just scratched the surface.
Dude, my favorite thing is when just rolling with, it could literally be anybody. Coach Phil, Coach Dave, literally anybody. Coach Felipe, when he was there, 140 pounds. I'm damn near 100 pounds more than this guy. And he is tossing me around like a rag doll, choking me out left and right. And you're exactly right. I heard Lex Friedman talk about this. Every time you tap is a notch down on your ego. Every time you tap, it's like, okay, I got to give up. And the journey of jiu-jitsu is so applicable and like transitory to pretty much every aspect of life for that exact reason, because you have these huge ups and downs. But then if you continue to do it over 10, 15 years, you look up and you're a black belt and you're like, holy shit. I know. Here's a question for you. Did you ever have a moment, it could have been before you got your blue belt or after, where you were like, you remembered your first couple classes and you're like, holy cow, like, I have seriously come a very long way? Did you ever have a moment like that?
Yeah, I have it every once in a while. Yeah.
There's a moment in my journey. I don't remember the exact timing, but I remember, like, almost like a lucid dream. I looked up and, like, remembered my first couple classes and then realized what I was doing now on the mats. And I'm like, if you had told me the day before I started jiu-jitsu in 6 months you would be doing this, I'd have been like, you're crazy. I don't even know how to do a shrimp.
Yeah.
It's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. And then, on the flip side of that, sometimes I go into class and I'm just like, I know nothing. I've forgotten everything. I'm like completely struggling against someone I feel like I should not be struggling against. And I'm just getting smashed. I was like, that's especially with people that have a wrestling background, but like, that's so, talk about an ego, like cutting down the ego. It's when like a white belt, like a 2-stripe white belt comes, like just entered the intermediate class. It's maybe a little bigger or something. And like gets around my guard or like and I'm in turtle and I'm just like, why am I here right now? Like this is not making, this should not be happening.
Yeah. That's so true though.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
It's like, there's definitely moments like, oh wow, it's really cool how far I've come. But then I feel like every time I hit that moment, I then also get hit with like I feel like I've gotten nowhere kind of. But I think like, that's part of the game. That's part of the game.
Dude, it's what I'm saying about like the journey of life. Like, that is literally life though. Like, in life, you're going to have these moments where you're like super high. You win a tournament, or you submit somebody that you've never submitted before, and you're gonna be like, holy shit, I'm there. And then the next day you get injured, or you get tapped by a white belt or something along those lines. And then you have to deal with those emotions and grapple with that within yourself and make the decision, okay, well, am I going to keep doing it or no? And I think just like in life, just like in business, just like in entrepreneurship, just like in relationships, and just like in jiu-jitsu, the people that continue to show up and continue to do it are the ones who look up 15, 20 years, have a successful marriage, have a successful business, are black belts. So I just can't speak highly enough about the journey of jiu-jitsu and the impact it's had on my life. I'm relatively sure that you could say the same. That's how we met. I mean,
yeah, man.
Partnered. I'm probably like 5-6 months ago. We were started training together. I mean, we train together a good bit. Pretty much every time we were in class together, we train.
Yeah, no, I like training with you. You're always crushing me, but I like that because I think this is really important. I think a lot of, I don't know, maybe it's different for different people, but
For me, I've gotten to the point now where I much rather get crushed and lose than I would crush somebody else. Like, yeah, obviously it's nice to win. There's that. But for me, like I loved rolling with you and I appreciate you rolling with me. Cause sometimes I felt like I was getting more out of it than you because you're doing phenomenal and crushing me. But I was constantly like, okay, cool. This is a challenge. Like I have to figure out how to deal with this. And so yeah, no, I appreciate those roles, man.
No, I got to give you some credit. You're a lot better than you're leading yourself to, or like making yourself out to be. There were some. I mean, number one, it's usually on size. Like I'm a bigger dude, so I can't. Like it'd be different if I go roll with Anthony. You know, like
yeah,
don't get me wrong. Anthony's actually a tough role because that man you can't pass his guard. It's literally impossible. But just the weight difference is so like noticeable. I have to find somebody who's like close to my weight. Obviously, you're a bigger dude as well. So
Yeah.
I mean, I remember we've had some good roles though, dude. Some of those.
Oh yeah.
What is it called? The team trainings. It's good stuff.
Oh yeah.
And that's I'll tell you what, you'd be hard pressed to find something that gets you more connected to a person than rolling with them for a long time. I feel you just learn so much more about the personality traits of a human by like in that type of environment.
Oh yeah, it's just such a unique thing, and it's really healthy. Like that's a whole other conversation, but especially like I will 100% put my kids in jiu-jitsu really early because it's such a most people go through their entire life and the like touch, the human connection is entirely just like it's always just sexual in nature. So it's like either you don't touch or it's like you know and so there's people have these really like weird mental frames around physical interaction with other people, and jiu-jitsu breaks that down, and like it's just so healthy from a like just being able to be physical with other people and just it's just
I've never thought about that perspective, dude. That's actually a great point. I've literally never thought about that, but it really does. And you think about back in the day, like hunter and gatherers, we would have been wrestling our entire lives. We would have been doing like physical things that were not sexual all the time. And nowadays you think about it, you hug somebody, you shake somebody's hand and you have sex. Like that's like the three main ways people physical touch. That's very interesting. Yeah. I've never thought about that.
Yeah. Other than like a handshake or a hug, if it's, someone close to you, it's like most people go through their entire life with no other type of like physical interaction with other people unless it's sexual. And so it's like, it's just, for me, it opened up this whole other realm of just like physicality in general, just human connection that's not sexual in any way. But it's like, it's really healthy because human touch in general. There's been these studies about this. People that don't have any sort of physical touch with other human beings, they get sick. Like you start to wither, and this is like a big issue with older people. A lot of the times, some of that health decline is just due to a lack of physical touch.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily like saying like people in nursing homes start doing jiu-jitsu. There's other solutions, but like massage and stuff like that. But I have a cousin that does massage therapy, and so she would talk with us. And it's just like you take someone that's maybe older, in decline, and you just introduce massage. It like just that human, little bit of skin to skin contact, human connection, and you'll see them start to come back to life in a surprising way.
I believe it. There's got to be some sort of neurotransmitter, neuromodulator, hormonal response to that. Pheromones as well. I know human to dog connection. I think the hormone is oxytocin that gets released in both us and them. So I'm sure there's something to that with humans as well. I got to tell you though, it's funny that you bring that up today because yesterday at jiu-jitsu, me and my brother are rolling together. We're doing north-south and we're doing like this pass, and several times he wears a cup and I'm just getting like hit in the face by his cup. And I'm like, dude, this is brotherhood right there, bro. Like I'm literally just sitting there, cup on my face. I'm like, this is jiu-jitsu, man. This is jujitsu.
Oh yeah. Does he? I didn't. Your brother's does jujitsu too?
Yeah, he's just started
I just started.
relatively recently, but this is how I do it with pretty much anything in my life. I don't know if this is good or bad, but when I find something that like impacts me positively, I pretty much just like pour it down everybody's throat until they do it. And that could be said for saunas. Like I bought a portable sauna my junior year in college, and I literally like would not stop talking about it until by the end of the semester, 11 people on my team, including our athletic trainer, had the same or a similar sauna.
Same sauna. What is the sauna?
I actually regret ever advertising that because I didn't know much about EMFs at that time, and it was a huge EMF emitter. So don't recommend.
Is it like infrared or something?
Yeah, but that's just an example. Like my parents bought a sauna. My parents bought a cold tub because I like would not stop talking about it. My brother was like, "Okay, dude, at some point I got to do jujitsu just to shut you up." But I got to tell you, I don't know if you have any siblings. It's a cool experience doing it with your brother too. It's just we're doing Muay Thai tonight as well. It's just really, really cool having those types of experiences with somebody as close to me as my brother, who's my best friend in the world. It's really, really cool. And my dad. I mean, my dad came into a couple classes. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I remember seeing him come in.
We got to get him back in there. He's fit. So this is an example, actually. He's 50. I think he was 57 when he started, 56 or 57. So on the note about like, obviously he's not in an elderly home or a nursing home, but it's not too late. Like you have to be pretty dang old for it to be too late. I really do believe that, because if you have the right coach, the right gym, the right atmosphere, it'll be tailored to you to where you can learn things. You can still push yourself. You can still even roll. But I mean, jiu-jitsu has been a remarkably positive impact on my life. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah, man. I'm right there with you.
Have you noticed any direct or indirect lessons from jiu-jitsu into business at all?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that we just went over. I mean, it just mirrors it. It mirrors it a lot, I think. But I think there's that. It's sort of a practice in persistence. Like it's that practice of being able to just if you can leave a training session feeling like I've learned nothing, like I feel like I'm still a white belt. If you can, especially I've started seeing that more and more, like now where I feel like I should be at a certain level, and then I feel like I leave a training session just like so far below that. Being able to leave with that feeling, and then be like, but I'm going back tomorrow, and then show up to class tomorrow and do it again until I feel, and push that much harder. I think that is just like it's a mental ability and a mental practice in persistence that just transcends all areas of life.
Very true.
The other day, so you said Anthony? Does he edit these?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so he's gonna see this. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if he watches or listens, but
so the other day, I don't think he's ever submitted me before. Maybe I'm incorrect about that, but he submitted me the other day, and it was clean. It was like I was not going light on him. He legitimately got my back, got me in a bow and arrow, and submitted me. And I mean, I'm a lot bigger. Like I feel like you, Anthony, like. Me to you is probably about the same as like me to Anthony, and as far as weight goes, I'm not sure, but I think it kind of goes that way. I don't know sure exactly how much he weighs, but I was just like, I was in shock, and it made me so happy because I was like, honestly, he works harder than me. Because he's there like 5 days a week, so it made me happy in that regard too. I was like, good for Anthony. I'm like, I try to get there 3 days a week, but I know I'm not doing it at the rate that he's doing it. So I was happy for him in that regard. But also it was just like that, man, like, cause it's like this guy he weighs way less. He's got his blue belt a good bit after me. And I was like, all right, like I got to double down. I got to get better. Get better. I'm not good enough.
He hit me with, I remember to this day, cause he's got smaller legs, like his leg just fits in my neck perfect. I was trying to pass his guard, and he ripped a triangle on me that was so tight. I still remember to this day. I was like, holy shit, dude. Like there was not an ounce of blood getting to my brain. But Jocko Willink talks about this. because obviously he's a black belt. He's been doing jiu-jitsu for like 25 years or something. And he'll have people come in and be like, dude, I'm going to get you one day. I'm going to get you. And he's like, yeah, jiu-jitsu works. If you put a choke on me, I'm going to tap. If you put an armbar on me, I'm going to tap. So it's the great equalizer. If a white belt puts a good choke on a black belt, guess who's going to tap? The black belt. So, I mean, it's just about getting to those positions and all that stuff. Obviously, it's pretty rare for a white belt to tap a black belt, but the moves themselves work. Like it's just a matter of whether or not somebody can get in that position. So I think that's also pretty valuable insight. Shout out to Anthony for the best guard. I've literally,
Insane.
I always joke with him. So he pulls guard when we roll, and then I'll just like grab his arm and like run around, like try to like pull him with. Like trying to pull him with me because I might have passed his guard one time in 20 plus rolls, dude. It's absurd.
You have to not. So he's so flexible that the only way I've been able to pass his guard is by literally not. And he's gotten actually good at countering this lately. He figured it out. But for a couple weeks, I was having pretty good success passing his guard by literally knotting. Like I would twist his arm around his leg and like knot him up and then pass him. And then, so he's figured that out now. It doesn't work as well anymore. But like it's so crazy.
For anybody listening, he's actually the editor of the podcast. So freaking legend of a dude. He can literally like, I don't even know how far he could go with his legs behind. Like he could probably get like a foot of distance between the back of his head and his leg. It's absolutely crazy. And I've literally yet to see anybody even get close to that level of flexibility. So. Crazy. We need to get him on a competition train because I think he'd do well.
I think he would too. Yeah. If you're in full mount, like you have to be completely laid flat. If you're not completely laid flat and have your elbows in, he will get his feet underneath your armpits and push you off.
What's that called? That's not the kipping escape. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, no, he'll do that. He's an animal. But that's the thing. Like the people there's some people out there that are that flexible and also exponentially more strong. And then those are the people that are like world champs and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy. It's also cool. I just started going to 10th Planet Austin.
How is that?
It's a completely different vibe, frankly. I mean, it's no gi only. It's really? Predominant. It's more or less competition oriented, which I mean, it's not good or bad. It's just the focus of the gym, I feel. But there's some dudes in there, man. There's some dudes that like, and some ladies, but I mean, there's some guys in there that are legit. I hope I can get to B Team at least once while I'm here just to do like a drop in. Have you ever heard of B Team?
What is that?
That's where like Nikki Ryan, Craig Jones, and Nikki Rodgo. I don't know if you pay attention to any of those jiu-jitsu guys.
I recognize the names.
Yeah. You're too focused on business. That's
yeah,
good.
I do really bad at keeping up. I wish I need to, but like I know the names, but I don't follow them that much.
Are you going to compete at all ever?
Well, I did New Breed last year.
Cool.
Tore my MCL, but I got silver in no-gi, and but I think I'm going to do New Breed again.
Cool.
Again this year. So,
is that no-gi and gi?
Yeah. Both.
Right on, dude. That's kind of a tough way to leave a competition with a torn MCL, but you know, that's another lesson right there.
Well, I tore it getting the silver in my last. I think it was. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure when it happened, but I think it was my last match that I lost for gold, and then I did. That was no gi was first, and then gi. So I did my gi with a torn MCL, and did not do very well.
Can't do much. Yeah, that's kind of a pretty big deficit you're putting yourself in.
Yeah, it was rough. That was a long. I decided after that I would much rather. I don't know if you remember when I came back from Costa Rica with my face beat up, but like I mean, yeah, it's my face, but I would take a black eye any day of the week before a knee tear.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. It's just like almost any other injury, but like knees are just
there's definitely thresholds
forever.
The podcast I did on the 4th with a buddy of mine named Vance, who's a professional MMA fighter. He told the story about when he like basically broke his face, and I don't know about. I'd probably rather tear a knee than that, but I mean, he said that he remembers like the mats like shaking and stuff. So there's definitely thresholds. But where did you go to in Costa Rica?
Tamarindo.
Right on, dude. I was
Yeah.
just there in June. Tamarindo's sweet. We went to Santa
Oh, yeah?
Teresa and then stayed right outside of Tamarindo. But Costa Rica, bro, I could see myself staying there for a while.
Yeah. Oh, it's phenomenal. Do you surf?
Yeah, I did. I'm pretty
Yeah, dude.
much like addicted now.
Oh yeah, bro. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. I love
Yeah.
surfing.
That's the
No, it
first
was
time I ever
not
surfed,
great.
dude. I was
Really?
Yeah, that's some good waves too. We went to Playa Grande. Did you ever hop over there?
Yeah. So is it up the coast from Tamarindo?
Just like literally like right across that estuary. It's like not even a mile away from Tamarindo, but just the way the peninsula is situated, the waves in Playa Grande are substantially bigger for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, I always just surfed on the beach in Tamarindo.
Yeah, that's where we did like a lesson
There.
and it was pretty mild that day, but we learned, which is cool. Talk to me about yoga. Did you get into yoga?
Oh yeah, dude, yoga. So I started kind of picking up yoga after that MCL started healing, because that's part of the issue is just like, so jujitsu. People talk about jujitsu being like murder yoga, and I love that term. Like murder yoga, it's just funny.
I've never heard it.
It's not yoga though. Like jujitsu by its very nature, you're in tight. You're creating frames. You're stiff. You know, you may not be like, if you're doing it well, you're not pushing out and doing a lot of that of like movement, but you're tight and you're posturing, right? All of that causes tightness in all of these muscles, causes everything to contract and tighten. And so the jiu-jitsu is awesome, but what I kind of realized, at least for me, is it was causing me to become more and more tight. And then the more tight I became, the more prone I was to injuries, like tearing MCLs or just tearing things in general. And so I started supplementing with yoga, and I've just been getting more and more into it. So now I try to do, so my ratio is I try to do one yoga class for every 2 jiu-jitsu class, or 1 hour of yoga for every 2 hours of jiu-jitsu, basically is how it breaks down. And by following that, my flexibility has gotten so much higher. I feel much stronger. All my balance and my knees and my joints are always stronger. I've felt a lot more confident on the mats because I feel like I'm not worried as much about tearing something or about damaging something. Also, it's interesting. In not all yoga is like this, but my experience with it has been, it is very much the opposite of jiu-jitsu in almost every way. So like it's even the, even the fact, like the mental side of it, even is like, it's all about staying calm, which I guess that's in jiu-jitsu too. But like jiu-jitsu is constantly sort of pulling you more into, like it pushes you more into tightness and
like alert,
going alert and stuff. And yoga is kind of like that opposite side. And I feel like they complement each other extremely well. I feel like there's a lot of sort of overlap where the training that calm mind in yoga while during strenuous activity and like relaxing the body, that goes into jiu-jitsu and allows you to be more relaxed and mindful in jiu-jitsu as well.
Entirely. I could see that crossover pretty vividly. Like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's been hugely impactful. And then my flexibility has gotten really, I'm nowhere near Anthony, but the other day I did get that same escape on mount. I pushed Rory off me. He was in full mount, and I let him kind of get high, and then I was able to get his armpits and push him. He's like, man, I thought Anthony could only do that.
I was about to say, he probably had some smart comment. That's funny.
Yeah. So, I've been kind of surprised because I hate like just normal stretching. But just doing the yoga, my flexibility has really, really improved.
People underestimate. I did yoga in high school a little bit with like a private coach, and then in college, me and my buddies I'm talking like, I say this and people don't believe me, 45-minute routine, 6 days a week for the better part of a year.
Nice.
Shout out Jonah Herney if you're listening to this. We would wake up, meditate, and then rip a yoga session every single morning in our living room. And people don't. I have 2 things on that. People don't give it enough credit. If done correctly, it's incredibly difficult. In terms of the muscular, like you can be put into some positions that you really, really, really struggle to stay in, whether that be because of muscular endurance, strength, or actual mobility. And the second thing that I want to say is there's things called passive and active range of motion. And a lot of people think like, oh, I'm flexible, I can touch my toes. Or I have this much spinal flexion when I push. That's your total range of motion passively. Like there's so much range of motion that your joint or a specific part of your body has to move, but your body is much smarter than that. It would never allow you to get into a range of motion actively that you can't control. Meaning, say I have 50 degrees of passive range of motion in a certain, say my hip joint. I can go 50 degrees internal rotation passively, meaning like with somebody helping me or with myself assisting. But with no assistance, I can only get into 35. When you get hurt is when you that difference when you're past your active. But I don't know if that makes sense, and I'm not an expert on this. But basically, what yoga does, in my opinion, and what it did for me was increase my passive range of motion while increasing my active range of motion. So I could not only could I get into further ranges of motion in more difficult positions, but I could actually control my muscles and control my body in those positions, which 100% correlates to jiu-jitsu and 100% correlates to a more healthy physical life in general. So I actually have been meaning to get back into yoga. I really am a big fan of it. I think jiu-jitsu, yoga, and surfing are like the trifecta of
there you go. And weightlifting. Gotta keep the weights. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm just saying, I feel like Costa Rica, for example, I feel like if you threw a rock, you could hit somebody that either surfed, did jiu-jitsu at one point in their life, or does yoga. Yeah. They seem to be intertwined. But yeah, and lifting weight. I mean, I remember last time we rolled, it had been a while, and you felt a lot more strong. So I don't know what you're doing, but it's definitely working.
Yeah, I've been trying. I've been bad the last couple of weeks, but man, it's hard to balance everything. But
it is. Hey, that's part of it, though.
Strength helps.
I love that active range of motion concept, though. Like,
dude,
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, only reason I know about it or conceptualize it that way is from my days as an athlete. I was always trying to figure out like specifically this one range of motion. My back leg when I was pitching, my right hip, the internal range of motion, because the more internal range of motion, the more you can get down the mound while still staying in your legs. That's a little bit in the weeds, but I was like hyper focused on it, and I have bad internal rotation. Yeah. So I had decent passive, but for some reason the muscles in my we only have like, internal rotation.
Yeah.
We have way more external rotators in our hips than internal rotators. So most people are inclined. That's like why most people walk or have a slight gait with their feet out.
Yeah.
That's external rotation. Most people have overused external rotators, so they're just way stronger. And I just remember like kind of diving into passive and active range of motion a lot doing that. I'm hoping to have my physical therapist from Atlanta. Dude, she actually, CrossFit Identity. It's right across the street from SBG. Have you seen that at all?
No, I didn't know there was a CrossFit gym there.
It's down Zonal. Well, it's not like right across the street. It's like a 2-minute drive down a road across the street. But I think she's like one of the best physical therapists in Atlanta, if not, like she's legit. And I'm trying to get her on the podcast, and that's one of the topics I want to discuss with her actually is active versus passive and how to increase and stuff like that. But
nice.
Yeah. So keep that in mind when you're doing yoga.
Yeah.
We got a couple more questions. Just back to entrepreneurship. What's going on with you now? Like, where's your time allocated now in terms of in business? You mentioned the software company is probably your predominant focus, but I think a lot of people are interested in that type of stuff in terms of entrepreneurs, people that own businesses, because like you mentioned, there's not somebody saying, hey, for this hour of the day, you do this, for this 2 hours of the day, you do this. I think people are interested in entrepreneurs' schedules because it's self-inflicted more or less. So like what's your schedule looking like?
It's not as consistent. I try to keep it pretty consistent. I definitely, so one of the things that I found to be super important for me with maintaining my own schedule is the difference between not knowing what to do at a given point in time and knowing what to do it's always so much easier to be productive if at least you know what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that ability to tell yourself what it is that you're supposed to be doing at a given point in time, that's kind of the difference maker when you're setting your own schedule. And so I've come up with a lot of different strategies to do that. I live by and die by my calendar. So that's one, is I am religious about keeping my Google Calendar filled out. And I've been looking, actually, I might start planning some other solutions because I know there's some good solutions for this, but I actually time block out tasks as well as events. So I will, and I intentionally leave areas open for like scheduling meetings and stuff, because I use Calendly usually for scheduling meetings with people. And so I'll leave time blocks open, that's sort of like open areas for people to book in. But then anything outside of that, I will, even if I don't have a specific event, I will put an event in and name it like the task that I'm trying to complete during that period of time. So time blocking, and not just, so I keep to-dos. To-dos is like the first line of defense, right? It's just having a to-do list, right? But everyone has to-do lists. I take the to-do list and I will, on a pretty regular basis, look at prioritize and execute, as Jocko would say. Prioritize and execute on the to-do list. Take what's the highest priority and time block it out. Estimate how long I think it's going to take. Put it on my calendar, block it off so no one's going to book calls on that time period. And then at least I know during those periods of times, this is what I'm supposed to be working on. And then in addition to that, I picked this up, and I partially copied this from somebody else. I need to print some more. I have this one that's used. My handwriting is atrocious, but I found it really helpful. It's kind of hard to see that, but it's like a 1 day, like morning 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on this side. I have like my highest priority to-dos. I have an area for my workout, and I'll just like write out what my workout is for that day. Like the food I'm going to eat, just some gratitude, some things I'm grateful for, a notes area, my top appointments. And then I also have just like a goal at the top, kind of like an overall, like what I'm aiming for at that period of time. And so I print these out, and I made them for myself, and I keep a stack on my desk, and I don't do it every day, but whenever I'm feeling like a little bit lost, like, oh, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, I need to schedule out my time, I need to be on my A game, I would take it to that next level. I got the to-dos, I got it time blocked on my calendar, but I'll take it to the next level, and I'll actually time block out the next day, fill out this sheet, put the day at the top, fill it out, time block it on paper with, physically with a pen. And then I leave that on my desk. And then the next day, that's the first thing I see when I wake up and come to my desk, is like this written out right in front on top of the keyboard, of what I'm going to do that day. And just having that clarity of, this is what at least I'm supposed to be doing at this point in time, hugely beneficial. Because it's like, you can't even, if you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing, you don't have the option to be disciplined, because you don't have like that thing set out to do. At least if it's laid out and planned out, then you can have the opportunity to be disciplined and do it.
I was just about to say, if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, you can't be doing it. So
yeah,
I think that's hugely beneficial. I just wrote both those down. And in terms of time blocking, this is another thing I learned from Jocko. Have you ever heard of Hofstadter's Law?
This sounds so familiar, but no, remind me.
Hofstadter's Law is, it will take longer than you think it will take, even after considering Hofstadter's Law. So it's kind of funny because it's a law that refers to itself, but this is so true. And this is something, because I'm not as religious as you, but I'm in college, for example, I had a 168 plan. Basically, there's 168 hours in a week, and every Sunday I would sit down and have a general time frame, like general schedule for every day with all my weekly tasks. And then each night I would spend 5 minutes updating it and making sure everything was tied in appropriately for the next day. And that was hugely beneficial in terms of time allocation. And what I also realized is, when I didn't do that, like when I didn't have a plan, you kind of already mentioned this, when I didn't have a plan of what to do, I couldn't execute on it. Like I would wake up and be like, oh, what should I do today? Like what needs to be done? But when I took the time to really delineate those tasks and those priorities, I would, oh, you know what? Here's my priority for the day. I'm going to do that first. Okay, here's my second, do that. But when you don't know, you don't know. And when you don't know, you can't do. So, Hofstadter's law is interesting to me. I think that that's something that's important in terms of time blocking, because that's an interesting strategy. What do you do? Say you allocate 2 hours for a task. You time block it out. It takes about an hour. What do you just fill the gap with other tasks that need to be done?
Well, so have you heard of Parkinson's law?
Remind me.
So Parkinson's law is the flip side of Hostetler's, is that a task will always expand to take up the time allotted. So I have found that usually when I time block out time, I rarely get things done faster than anticipated. But if I do, I'll just start on the next thing. I'll push everything forward. I don't stay married to my plan. I just reevaluate at the end of the day and then make the next plan for tomorrow based on where I ended up. Whether I fell short or if I was able to get ahead. I mean, that's awesome. If I can get ahead of what I had planned, I always feel like extra accomplished, and then I can jump forward on the plan for the day after that.
That's an interesting law right there. I've heard that before, but I never really thought about it. And then also it does kind of sound like the opposite of Hofstadter's.
I think they complement each other in a way.
Yeah, it's like the yin and the yang. There's a threshold that needs to be met, or a dichotomy to keep up with the Jocko lingo. But because the way I look at it in terms of like resource allocation is how I like to. It's like a paradigm I look at a lot of things through. Just for example, a kitchen cabinet. A lot of people think organization. The key to organization is having containers. The key to organization is having less stuff and less. no, seriously. The key to organization is having less stuff. Well, so let me back up. The people think that the key to organization is to have containers, when in reality it's to have less stuff and less places to put things. So my example that I use is kitchen cabinets. Have you ever seen a really, really cluttered open cabinet with no doors? The open cabinets that are just like basically just shelves? Very rarely, right?
Because you can't hide it?
Exactly. And people are like, if I can't hide it, then I'm going to make sure everything's organized. And then when you realize that you have to make sure that everything's organized, you realize then that the more things you have, the harder it is for you to organize them. And so tying that back into time allocation, and also to your comment about when you were starting your software company and trying to go insurance agencies and real estate, it's that same deal. It takes up the space that you give it. So if you only give it the space for the niche that you're in, then you'll maximize that space. But then if you give it the space for insurance and real estate and whatever else, then you're going to be spread this way over this period, over this threshold, as opposed to this tall over this. I don't know if that makes any sense. And for people that are listening, you're going to have to watch to get the hand visuals I just laid out.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. Parkinson's law, man. I appreciate you putting me onto that.
Yeah. It was actually, I'd heard about it before, but it was in that article about Twitter. Cause that was like, that's what it is like the task of like maintaining something like Twitter is not that, I mean, it's complex, but it's not that complex. It doesn't require having 500 devs on it. You can do it with a team of like 10, 20 devs. And it's just that if you put in the 500 devs, they will all find something to do. They will all figure out something to stay productive doing. But yeah, I think it's the flip side. It's like, yes, you should always anticipate something's going to take longer. I think that's where it's like, you can't stay too married to a plan. When like, if every time you have to deviate from your plan, especially with time blocking or anything, if you're then freaking out every time you have to deviate from the plan, like that doesn't serve you and attacking the next day.
Yeah.
But like but at the same time, it's like also you have to not, if you just start trying to, allocate more and more time. If you say, oh, this simple task is going to take me all day, but because of Hostetler's law, I'm going to give it all day. It was like, well, it might take all day if you allocate all day. So
the Parkinson's, it's like Parkinson's creates a sense of urgency. Parkinson's law, let me go ahead and clarify that. Parkinson's law creates a sense of urgency. And then Hofstadter's law is the contingency almost, because the last thing you want, I think the reason that Hofstadter's law is important is specifically with time blocking and calendar organization is the idea that what happens is people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. So you put all these tasks on your plate for a day and you're like, oh, that'll take me an hour. And then it ends up taking you 3 hours, and then your entire day's off because then you had a meeting right after that, and et cetera, et cetera. So as opposed to putting 15 things that are like very, very, very no contingency in terms of time, like margin, put 8 things that you know for sure that you can allocate a certain amount of time to and get them done. It's an interesting dichotomy that you have to operate between, especially like we mentioned, for you being an entrepreneur. That's very important because you don't have somebody saying, hey, be here from this time to this time and be doing X. Your success and your failure is completely dependent on your ability to maximize and utilize your time properly. So I think that's very, very important. And I think you have an interesting insight on it because you're living it. So,
yeah. And it's, I have to control that time. And I think that's, a lot of people struggle with that. And I think this is one thing I kind of get into a lot with some of my more entrepreneurial friends. It's like really easy to like try to sit on our high horses and be like, we're fancy entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, it's like, I think there is so most people are not wired to be entrepreneurs, and that's a good thing. And like, we absolutely need the people that can operate within a very established structure and can be extremely productive. They're really are going to struggle if you try to make them set their own schedules and control their own time and build their own things, right? But they excel within somebody else's structure, right? It's our job to create things and then eventually structurize them so that those people can come in and do the work that we can't do because we're not wired to exist, to like operate within the structure like that.
Exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone has their role in how things work. And creating productive organizations and businesses. And so it's really interesting. I think that's something that I've learned to really appreciate people more and more that can operate within that structure. Mm-hmm. And then like thinking less about, oh, these people are working for me. Like as I've started to bring people on board and hire people, I've thought more and more less about, oh, these people are working for me. They do what I want them to do. And more about, okay, how can I help this person to excel and what in their role in the business? How can I create structures and processes and support and schedules and how can I create that around them so that they're in the perfect bubble in which they can really excel.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
I think that's a really important thing. That's where I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, is that like where they feel like they got to duplicate themselves to grow. And I think that's not the answer. You're never going to be able to duplicate yourself, right? You got to figure out, how do I create structures that other people can come into that aren't entrepreneurially wired.
And the idea that duplicating yourself is it's an egotistical and very common misconception. Because if you had a bunch of yous, you'd be butting heads because you're you for the reason, for like you are where you are because you are you. So if you brought in a bunch of yous, then you would all be trying to do the exact same thing. You need that complementary workforce and team. I think that's an interesting challenge I haven't had to deal with. At some point I will. Hiring people. What have you learned about like leadership and management and maybe business? What have you learned from hiring people? Because that's not, a lot of people, most people don't ever experience that of taking the risk of bringing on another human being to your team. So what have you learned through that?
So I've done this two times. At one point in my agency, I brought on a couple people. I think that was the biggest thing, is just like kind of putting yourself in their shoes and understanding that they're not going to operate in an entrepreneurial way, and like creating that environment for them to excel, and really like kind of taking on more of a servant mindset of like, okay, how can I help this person to be successful? And then also I think the biggest thing, I'm not necessarily like the best in the world at this, but I'm trying to be better at it. Is it's really important to know what people want. It's really important to know like what does success mean to them, because if you're going to help someone to be successful in the role that you've placed them in, you also need to know like what are they looking for out of this? What kind of money are they looking to make? What kind of experience they're going to be spending a lot of time in your environment that you've created for them in your business. So what kind of lifestyle do they, what is that experience like that they're looking for there? I think I think it's cool to have a really tight knit team, but at the same time, I've always been really careful not to, and this is from some experience that I had early on, trying to kind of work, in like the bar. I think the idea of creating a family around a business is kind of toxic. At the end of the day, like people want two things generally when they work for a business. They want to make money and they want to enjoy that time. They want to actually feel like they're accomplishing something. They want to have a feeling of accomplishment in that time that they're spending inside of your business. And so like understanding, what gives them that feeling of accomplishment and what is their financial goals, and then helping them to see a clear path to reach those financial goals with you is super critical. And like the reason people quit is because they don't see a path to the financial goals that they have, and or they hate their day-to-day life in that job. So if you can kind of figure out those two things, and I think one of the most dangerous things, and it's really tempting as an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur we might get a lot of fulfillment just out of the process of building, right, out of the idea of just this thing. But I think, and it's cool if someone can come in as an employee and also have that excitement, but I think it should never be something that's taken for granted. And one of the most dangerous things is telling someone like, oh, I need you to work hard just because, like, I need you to have passion for this thing, like expecting them to have ownership and passion for it the same way you do as an owner or as an entrepreneur. I think it's super dangerous. It's like the fastest way to alienate someone. Like,
Yeah.
So like understanding what it is that they want and then helping them see a path to get there.
So the thought that I just had that I wrote down, first off, that's a very, very valuable insight. I think, like I mentioned, you have a unique perspective on it because you're a younger entrepreneur having done that. The thought I just wrote down is understand desires so you can incentivize properly, because the reality is we operate on incentives. Like every decision we make is based on some incentive hierarchy.
Yeah.
And if you as the owner or the boss or the entrepreneur misconceive or don't even care to take note of what your employees want, then you can't incentivize them. And then if they're not incentivized, they're not going to do the job that you want them to do. And this is coming from somebody who's never hired somebody. So take that with a grain of salt. This is just like how I perceive the psychology of it all. So that's very interesting. I think that also translates to not just in business, man, relationships, friendships, whatever it is. Because if you don't understand clearly what you want and then what somebody else wants, like for me to come, if me and you were going to start a business or something, and I never took into account what you want, like never actually really said, hey man, what is it that you desire to get out of this endeavor we are about to embark on? And I never took that into account. 3 months, 6 months, 2 years down the road, when we look up and we're both looking two different directions, I'm going to be like, what the fuck, dude? And you're going to be like, I want to go here. And then I'm going to say, I want to go here, when we could have just figured that out at point A and adjusted accordingly. So I think that's very interesting. I do think there's different temperaments in life. I think some people are more inclined to be entrepreneurial. I think I've heard this, not paradigm, but this dichotomy kind of recently, hunter-gatherer, farmer. I don't know if you've heard anybody speak about that. Basically so if you think about what farming was and is it's a very long, drawn out process of doing the same thing. And that's not bad, right? That's not a bad thing. That's just how some people operate. It's the temperament of some people. They fit better into that category. And then you think about hunter and gatherers, it was much more this. I need to go hunt, then I'm going to eat, then I'm going to hunt, then I'm going to eat, then I'm going to go move to this place and then do this. So it's, in my opinion, this is why I think partnerships are so cool, and having co-founders and the idea of coming together with somebody who complements you. Hunter and gatherer, which is something that I align with that temperament much more. ADHD as a kid, or whatever you want to call it. Just going up and down, having ideas, solving problems, complemented by somebody who shares some of the belief, but is more of a farmer and can help keep you, or keep me steady, or keep a hunter and gatherer steady. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that's cool.
That's an interesting perspective also, that I've been trying to really dive into recently, because when you simplify it that way, hey, is this person more of a hunter and gatherer? Once again, it's not right or wrong. It's the inherent temperaments that we have and that we build, and everybody's got one. But is this person a hunter and gatherer? How do I operate with that human being? Okay, this person's more farmer. They want more structure. They want to know exactly what they need to do, when they need to do it by. They need to know where they need to be. And then you can kind of not feed them, but you can give them what they need to succeed. And then the same goes for hunter-gatherer. So that's interesting dichotomy I've been diving into recently.
I like that. I like that a lot. I like how you're very succinct in your ability to communicate these ideas. I love it. I'd have a tendency to ramble. It's like I'm getting to the point eventually.
Dude, one thing that's interesting about doing a podcast, I look back and I watch these videos and I'm like, you motherfucker. Like, I interrupt all the time. I talk way too much. Like, I feel like I've had guests on and I've talked more than them. And I'm like, you didn't bring them on so you could talk to them. I'll realize that I say and like too much. It's just funny to hear yourself speak, because not a lot of people really do that. And it definitely exposes. I'm even only doing, this is my 9th or 10th recording. I've already started like trying to really dive into being more precise with my words, listening way more. I don't know if I've done a good job of that today, but I really do try to listen more than I speak, because my first couple episodes I was like spewing. So, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, I can tell you're polished.
Hopefully,
I can tell you're working at it.
Hopefully in 2 or 3 years, or whenever you come back on the show, you've got you're closer to that exit, and I'm not interrupting and more precise with my speech. So that'd be awesome. But I think that's a good place to wrap it up, bro. I mean, you got any last thoughts for any entrepreneurs or people that are listening?
Yeah, man, just stay in the game. That's how you win. You just gotta stay in the game. Simple. You can't lose if you don't quit.
Damn good point. All right, AJ, man, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nolan. It's been awesome.